Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and to share with you my thoughts on this very difficult topic at the moment. I think doing Russia-related research has never really been easy for practical and for ideological reasons. But now, after Russia's unprovoked attack on Ukraine, this research has become not only difficult but also painful, and it really has a huge impact on how we can do Russia-related research at all at this moment. And I currently work as a curator at the Finnish National Gallery, but I also started a PhD project years ago, and my topic are the provenances of cultural objects and artworks in Finnish museum collections that are related to the Russian revolutions. And I came across with this topic years ago in a project at the Finnish National Gallery. And since I studied Russian language at school and then later at the university in Finland, it was a kind of an easy choice for me to dig into the historical relations between Russia and Finland. And here I am today with my easy choice. So a quick look at how this topic has been studied so far. So the topic, like how countless artworks and cultural objects, porcelain, silverware, precious metals, precious stones, were sold abroad from the Soviet Union between roughly 1918 and 1936. And the subject began to be revealed only during the 1980s, but it was just after the collapse of the Soviet Union when it was really possible to study the massive scale and the systemacy of these sales. And during 2000s, there have been many publications in many languages been published, and conferences and institutional cooperation also with Russian museums and so forth. All this despite Russia's development into a totalitarian state. Now this phase is clearly over, and no institutional cooperation with Russian museums or other institutions, and I think there is no really going back to what it was before. When I talk about Russian provenances, the first question is often if the objects should be given back to somebody. And I give a very sort of like confusing and incoherent answer. And now I decided not to do that, but to open up a bit why I give this confusing and incoherent answers. And I think it's easiest maybe to demonstrate this complexity with a comparison to Nazi Germany, with its clear time frame and sort of like sufficiently widely shared framework of interpretation. We have some common ground, as Lea said earlier today, for making drawing conclusions. It's not the same with Russia. When we talk about the Russian Revolution, the first question is how to call the event that has traditionally been called either October Revolution or Russian Revolution. And most historians agree nowadays that it was a coup without the support of the majority of people, and especially without the support of the majority of people for creating a dictatorship. But I use now the term Russian Revolution simply because it's the most well-known term to this event, no ideology in that. Even when we come to a conclusion that the Russian Revolution was a coup, it does not cancel the existence of the Soviet Union for more than 70 years, and the fact that it was recognized by the surrounding world. And I think it's also very important to remember that Russia is a direct successor state of the Soviet Union and has not condemned many of the most shocking crimes against humanity. So there is no really resignation from the illegalities of the Soviet Union. And this is what makes this all very complicated. Also, if you think about who lost most in the Russian Revolution from the point of view of just property, it was the Russian nobility, with its enormous wealth. But thinking that these super-rich families, such as Stroganovs or Yusupovs or Sheremetievs, well-known names also in the West, thinking them as just victims is not really straightforward, because all the wealth they were able to gather, it was based on the very oppressive Tsarist system. Then I also wanted to take up a couple of examples of how historical justice has been interpreted in Russia today. One example is the so-called restitution law that was passed in 2010. And it was about the transferring, possibility to transfer the church property. It was buildings from the state to the Russian Orthodox Church that had owned them before 1918. And the law passed regardless of strong opposition from professionals. As is typical in Russia, laws pass regardless of whatever. And another example of these problems of historical justice are the oligarchs buying back the lost treasures like Fabergé eggs. And this also, it potentially contributes to kind of a nostalgic image of the pre-revolutionary imperialist Russia. So if I had to summarize all this and much more into just one word, I would say that the problem is presentism. So the use of history in terms of today's needs. And as we have seen now quite clearly, today's needs change extremely rapidly. And I think it's also somewhere here in this bigger picture where the seeds for potential disinformation are. So this is the background which I have in my mind when I try to orientate with Russian provenances. But my research methods are otherwise really simple and typical for provenance research. And the best way for me has been to try to form groups of objects, not to study single objects, but to try to form groups. And so far I have studied about 100 objects in several Finnish museums and tried to organize them according to the repeating patterns in the provenance. And one group that is very nice and clear are old masters that have quite often a Russian provenance in Finnish context, if they were acquired roughly between 1917 and 1930s. So that is one of my clearest groups. And here in this blue circle I've also listed some of the typical acquisition methods that I have recognized in the Finnish context, but now there is no access to Russian archives, so it's really difficult to draw better conclusions. But that's how it is right now, so you have to cope with that. Here are also some examples of the very sources I use, just to demonstrate what kind of fragments of information form the basis for my groups of objects. And you see top left, you see a label referring to a small Russian collection in St. Petersburg, Baron Nikolai Yegorovich Wrangel's collection. And then bottom left, there's a stretcher with a handwritten remark, Petrogov Palace. Then on top right, you see two wax seals, one of which is the Soviet customs, and the other one by an organization, state organization called Narkompros, Narodny Commissariat Prosveshchenia, People's Commissariat for Enlightenment. And on the bottom right, you see a museum label, Государственный музей изящных искусств, the Pushkin State Museum of Fine Arts, later. These examples of how I carry on this research with objects. One important reason for why I also study these objects as groups and not through single objects is because written sources are so politically colored, and you would need something to compare them with in order not to get a too kind of narrow, one-sided picture. And Finland was a very anti-communist state in the 1920s and 30s. And especially documents that had something to do. They were written about Russian-related issues, not just provenances, but any Russian-related issues. They were often produced by really anti-communist organizations. And here we see one example, a piece of news from 1925. When some Finnish art dealers were not just accused for smuggling and cooperating with the Soviet Union, but also for murdering people. And there was no GDPR at that time, so you could publish things like this in a daily paper. But for me, this is, of course, fortunate, especially now when there's no access to Russian archives. The last thing I would like to share with you, it's just a few principles that I try to keep in my mind when I feel lost and disoriented and somehow worried about everything when I try to deal with these Russian provenances. I wish somebody had told me at least some of this when I got interested in Russia-related issues. But first of all, I think doing Russia-related research is never non-political. Just face it. It's easier that way. You say it aloud, then you can talk about it. Then the next one. Be honest with the risks. There are high risks with Russia. It's a very risky country, and the limitations are big. And things like the future doesn't look good. It looks bad. Be honest with that. And I think it's also important to when you write your conclusion or write an article, so just say clearly what you don't know. Say what you know, but also say what you don't know. Say what you cannot do. And I think that's also the best weapon against the potential disinformation. You are clear with what you want to say. And then the last one, be extra careful with assuming. As I have tried to show you, there's a lot of history politics in here. And sources can be, as in my case, the sources can be really politically colored. So when you know the narratives and you know the counter-narratives, you can work with them. And then you can find some solid ground under your feet. Thank you.